Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to All Together, the Family Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Now, let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, as always, Dina Sargeant. Now, we all say parenting is a big thing. Step parenting is a whole other ballgame. We're dealing with some of the things that either we have dealt with or are facing at the moment. Some might even argue that it is an even bigger aspect when joining an already created family, or even combining two families. To help guide us through this topic is Lindsey Staton. She is working as a life coach as well as running a blog on different areas, including blended families. How are you going today, Lindsey?
Doing well. How are you, Dina?
I'm doing amazing. I'm trying to stay cool at the moment, so you can probably hear the aircon running in the background at some moments, but yeah, trying to stay cool here.
We're having a cold snap here in Florida, which is unusual, so the heat might kick on here in a minute.
Okay, good. Completely opposite ends of the world.
Exactly.
All right, so do you mind telling the audience who don't already know you a little bit more about yourself and sort of how you got into talking about blended families?
Absolutely. I got married for the second time back in November of 2010. And I had a 3-year-old, and my soon-to-be husband had a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. And every time I go through a new phase of life, I'm a big reader. So I want to read as much as I can. So I think it's probably just to feed myself a little more of the illusion of control. There is no such thing as actually having control of your life, but I feel like the more prepared I can be, the better. So before I got married, the first time I read lots of books on, newlywed issues. And then when I got pregnant, I read all about being pregnant. And then I had my baby, so I read about babies and toddlers. And then I was getting divorced and separated. So I was reading about how, to kind of do life after that. And then when I met my current husband and looking at the prospect of having to combine two families, I started reading books like crazy about blending families and step parenting and all of that, just to be as prepared as possible. And after doing all this research, I've found that there are a lot of families out there dealing with similar issues. You don't have a whole lot of people talking about it. So I think just being willing to talk about it, to share what I've learned from my own research and my own experiences has just proved a surprising audience for me, actually.
That sounds like an incredible use of sort of learning everything, just sharing it around, and similar to what we're doing now, just sharing as much of information as you can. And I think it's an amazing start to probably a journey that you didn't expect through life.
Absolutely. Nobody sits around as a girl and says, "Oh, I can't wait to get married more than once and be a stepmother." People sit around and think, "I can't wait to get married and be a mom." But yeah, stepmom is not something you sit around and fantasize about or plan for. It can have incredible blessings as well, but it's definitely a position in life that's born out of some kind of brokenness. Mm-hmm. So it's not something anybody wishes for, but it can be something still very beautiful.
Yeah, no, it's like shattered glass. It still becomes like a beautiful little vase or something
Perfect.
amazing. Yeah, so that's amazing. So to get a little bit more knowledge about you and to learn a bit more about you, we're going to play a little icebreaker that we love to do for every guest.
Okay.
Just sort of sharing the first thing that comes to mind in this different areas, and yeah, we'll see what we get.
Okay.
All right, so the first one is your favorite book.
Oh, my favorite book. Let's see. I read an incredible biography. I'm very much into nonfiction, just informational and learning. I'm kind of a nerd. I just feel like I need to know everything about everything. And I had a friend recommend to me a book by Eric Metaxas called Bonhoeffer, about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And he was a pastor, and he was actually a spy. Um, Within Nazi Germany, and he was against Hitler and the Nazis, and he was trying to work from the inside to dismantle that regime. And it is Eric Metaxas is a phenomenal writer, and I had the privilege of meeting him. And I told him, here's the thing about your writing style: is on every single page there is a line, a sentence or a phrase that I would be willing to frame and hang on my wall. Like, just his style is just stunning. And the story is incredibly inspiring and hard to believe, actually. But that's easily one of my favorite books.
It's amazing how much you remember from like the person that you've read so much about, and just all the different things that their life as well. Like I think biographies are probably one of the biggest things you can read about a person, because usually it's written by either themselves or a ghostwriter.
Right.
So it's like deep in depth. It's not just what articles are written about him. It's like from his words.
Exactly.
Yeah. How about your favorite movie?
Oh, my favorite movie. It's kind of, it's not anything award winning. I don't think I think it came out in 2001. It's called Almost Famous.
Oh yeah.
And
Okay.
did you see that? And
I've
I
seen
think
it before.
it was Kate Hudson's breakout movie. And I love rock and roll history, and I love journalism. So it was about a rock journalist, and it's just one of my favorite movies. And my husband and I say quotes from it all the time. So he knows it whenever I'm sick or needs. It's like my visual version of comfort food. He's like, if I'm having a bad day, he goes, "Do you want to watch Almost Famous?" I'm like, "Yes, that will help. So let's watch that." That's probably my favorite movie.
See, it's nice having someone that sort of recognizes that as well, being like, okay, this is what you need to watch in order to cheer you up, in order to feel better. This is the movie. So
Exactly.
comfort
Exactly.
films are very important, I think.
Yes.
How about your favorite podcast?
A podcast I was really enjoying recently is called the Boss Up podcast.
Hmm.
When I started my life coaching business, um, I love the relationships and the conversations I have with people, but I'm not a business minded person. And the girl that hosts this, her name is Lindsey Teague Moreno, and she just had a lot of really good practical business advice, especially when it's your own business, building your own business. I wish I could have just handed all of that off to someone else so I could just focus on the people and talking to the people. But yeah, it's important for getting your brand out there and all that stuff. And so that was a really helpful podcast for me.
Okay, well that's always important to have. I love those podcasts that sort of teach you a lot more than you
Yes.
would actually sit down and actually want to learn.
Right.
So, yeah. How about a famous role model that you admire?
Um, I really admire Brene Brown. She has written a number of books that are also probably on my list of some favorite books. She's been on Oprah. let's see, I believe she has something on Netflix right now, and she did a TED talk years ago that just exploded. And she's a researcher, a psychology researcher, so not necessarily a therapist, but very driven by data. And she spent 10 years researching the relationship between shame and courage and vulnerability. And it was just a fascinating read. And I just think in a culture where being vulnerable has such a negative connotation, and you feel like vulnerable, even the word, it makes you feel scared and anxious, but how it can be, she talks about how it can be a source of great courage, and how important it is in relationships to have a certain level of vulnerability just for the sake of connection. And in order to talk about it, she puts herself out there quite a bit, which I admire. It's really, really hard for a lot of people to be vulnerable. And then for relationship junkies like me, just being given permission to, hey, go ahead, put yourself out there, because that's what people connect with. So I would say she's definitely a role model for sure.
Wow, she sounds like you could learn a lot from her very, very easily. How about a favorite course that you've completed?
Like I said, I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly trying to learn different things. Big stage of life researcher. So right now I'm reading a lot about having grown children. Now that I have two kids that are out of the house, that are in college, and one who's still in high school, how your relationships as a parent change with, having grown children who are growing up and leaving the house, and, wanting to maintain that relationship as much as possible. So I would say that's something I'm studying deeply right now. Just again, trying to do everything right, trying to maintain some sense of control, but really just to try to maintain relationships. Relationships are everything to me. And so if I can read what some other experts are saying and try to bring that into practice, I'm always willing to do that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think you can learn a lot from other people and other people's life experiences as well. So when they're willing to share it, it's like even more impactful.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so talking about what we brought you onto here to talk about, sort of just the um, in-depth sort of look into step parenting, because it's not something that is, like you said earlier, we don't talk about it that often. It's not written about so often because it's not something that you really plan your life for, I think, like we've said earlier. So when you think of the definition of family, do you have a certain definition for it?
I think the definition is constantly changing. And back when I was a child, and even when I was married the first time, it was very clearly defined. Mom, dad, kids. Then I guess the word they use is nuclear family. Is kind of just the baseline definition I think of. But as I've grown and have experienced different kinds of families and different relationships and been a part of different families, I would say that's definitely open for discussion, how you define family. And
Mm-hmm.
even these days, I find myself referring to even very close friends as family. My mother-in-law, my husband's mother, was in town last week, and we had some dear friends over for dinner. And I'm like, telling her, I'm like, these people are part of our family, and we're not related in any way, but I feel like family is now kind of, as a child, you need more structure in your family and your definition of family in your younger years. And then as you get older, you just kind of surround yourself with people who unconditionally love you and support you and are there for you. And I think family, the definition is much more open to translation now.
No, I definitely agree. I love the idea of, I think I definitely agree with you. When I was younger, you sort of understood it as a, okay, it's like the very, like you said, nuclear family, and there's a very hard set definition as to you can't choose your family. But as you get older, you realize you can choose who your family members are and who you want to be in your family. I love that we're now able to do that. I think you're able to now recognize that you can choose who you want to be a part of your life, and that does sort of equal up to your family. You may not be related to them, but having a connection with them, I think, is even more important.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's all about that connection and that sense of safety.
So, what do you think the position of a family is in today's society?
I think it's still very important. The definition may change, but just to have, um, let's see, what am I trying to say? Just trying to have a go-to, a safe place, a starting point, a foundation. That's what I was trying to think of the word. Um, just having something really sturdy and steady under you by way of relationships. And I think um, for years, when choosing your family wasn't really something that a lot of people did, it was nice to have that blood relation, and that was your obligation to someone else. Is even if you weren't um, necessarily someone you would choose, they were your family, and you were there. And I think that still applies in most situations, but I think also people giving themselves permission to invest in other people and build into other people and offer that unconditional support is really starting to become a legitimate source of family. And as long as there's as long as there is a small group, a large group, people that you can 100% count on, and you like to think that that's your blood family. It's not always the case anymore, and sometimes beyond circumstances beyond your control. But it's important to have some semblance of family, no matter what that looks like. I still think it's very important in society.
Mhm. No, I definitely agree with you. I think it definitely holds a difference in because of the definition that we see it, and it definitely holds such a different stance than it did from let's say 10, 20 years ago. It's different, but it's still very the similar concept than what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, how do you define parental relationships in general?
Um, I think a parental relationship is um, from a position of a parent. I'm right. Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle now, where I have. I'm still very much a child to my parents, and as my mother told me when my daughter was born, um, I remember she pointed to my daughter who was playing on the floor, and she said, "Do you see that child there?" She said, "That is how I see you. That is how I will always see you." And I totally understand that now. She kept saying, "Wait till you're a mother, wait till you're a mother." And unfortunately, she is, as always, right. Um,
Okay.
so there's that. It's just, it is unconditional love for another being. You want to pour everything you know into them. You want to help them in every situation, any kind of pain they experience. You have a desperate and almost panicky sort of desire to make it go away, to fix things that you cannot fix. And I heard another quote that said, "Becoming a parent, there, your ability to love increases exponentially, as well as your ability to fear." And so, yes, you are just madly in love with this creature that you are now responsible for, and all of a sudden you are seeing danger everywhere, and you become. I used to be, let's see, much more polite, I think, person, and then when I became a mother, that instinct, that mama bear, that is what people some call it. I got much more feisty, and as sometimes not even necessarily, but just very protective and really willing to go to lengths that I never thought I would in order to protect my children.
I think that's an insane, like, especially when you're talking about the your mom being right and how she's always going to see you and it's all going to be the same. I'm waiting. I can easily wait until I'll ever let my mom know she's right when it comes to that situation.
I know. But she knows is the problem. You don't even have to tell her. She's like, I know I'm right, and she knows I'm right.
Yeah.
She's out there. She won't tell me, but I know she knows.
Exactly. And I think it's insane. I think I have a couple of friends who recently had their first child, and they're like, the insane feeling I feel to just protect them, just put them in a bubble and never let anything touch them, never
It's
let anyone want to hurt them.
it's mind blowing for sure.
Yeah. So when we're talking about the difference between biological and step parenting, the relationship between the two have you seen or even noticed the difference between?
I think it's very different, and I think it's important that it's very different.
Mhm.
And a lot of mistakes I see people make, and something that I caught myself doing a lot was I didn't know how to be a step parent, but I knew how to be a parent. So um, when we joined our two families, I would find myself um, very much treating my stepchildren like they were mine, which sounds really good in theory. It sounds good in theory. Um, but I think looking back and going forward, even, I think it's very important to not necessarily feel differently towards your stepkids. The more you can love them like your own, the better. But as far as the position of authority, um, really stepping back, and I tell friends of mine, I'm like, you almost want to be it's almost more of an aunt relationship, like an aunt than a parent,
Mhm.
because they have parents. And good grief, two parents is definitely more than enough for some people. But and I noticed also that role changes as the children grow. Sometimes they need more of you. Sometimes they need less of you. And I think it's important that there is a difference, not in the way, like, I wouldn't want them to know that. Wouldn't want them to see that I treat my biological daughter differently than I treat my stepchildren. But at the same time, I would definitely want to respect that step removed when it comes to discipline and um, making hard decisions like that, and leaving that more to the biological parent.
Mhm. No, I think it's a really good way that you've put it, seeing it as an aunt relationship. Like, it's still family, but it's a different part of family where they not get to make all decisions. I think that's the thing that even thinking about it, how I trying to understand the step families is really difficult for me because I will never seen it. I was like, how do you do the rules? Are the rules going to be different for between your child and the child that the family that's already been created? Like, is there a difference in the way that the rules that are set between the two?
Yes, probably so. I that was not something that my husband and I discussed ahead of time, and I think we thought that we would, even though I had read a lot of books, and he did ask me because he knew that I had read so much about some things, but we we were really kind of making it up as we went along. When I think we could have said on the front end, this is what I'm going to do with my kids. Is that something you agree with? Or this is what I was going to teach my daughter to do. Is that something you'd like to be a part of? And I remember a funny story from early on in our marriage. My stepdaughter was, she was probably 10 at this point, and my daughter would have been 6. And my stepdaughter got her ears pierced when she was 8. And apparently the two of them had been discussing this. And they came up to me in the kitchen, and my stepdaughter, with my biological daughter standing next to her, she said, Lindsey, is Caroline going to get her ears pierced when she's 8, like I did? And I said, no. And she said, but, and then, my daughter was like, why not? Why not? And I said, this is complicated, you guys. Let me put it to you this way. It will never, ever be fair. In this house, fair, we left fair a long time ago. Like, it will, what, is allowed for you and what happens for you may always be different. So it's never going to be fair. So let's just go ahead and know that right now. And I looked at my daughter and I said, but specifically about this situation, Sydney's mom is her biological mother. Sydney's mom does not get to decide when you get your ears pierced. And their eyes both got big. I said, I'm not trying to say that in a mean way. I'm just saying I am still the mom, at least of you. And so her mother decided for her, and I will decide for you. And so I think that was one of the times, and it was so precious because our 3 children immediately started calling each other brother and sister. They completely loved each other and saw each other as siblings immediately. And it was probably because of the age difference. There wasn't a lot of competition. So I think even them, being surprised, like, oh, it's not going to be the same. Why wouldn't it be the same? Well, it's complicated, but just know it's not fair. It's never going to be fair. But just hang with us and just keep asking questions, and we'll just let you know. So it was just really funny when they approached me with that, and I was like, that's a pretty good illustration on them wondering, so how's it going to be? Who's really in charge here? And it's messy for sure, and it doesn't come off as fair to them or to us for that matter. But again, if it's something that's its starting place is a sense of brokenness, it has to be messy. It just has to be messy, and that doesn't mean it's not good. It just means it's messy.
It's kind of in a similar way. Like, I can relate to that in terms of the difference between how I grew up and how my cousins grew up. Like, that's the sort of,
yes.
Yeah. So that's sort of the similarity that I'm sort of just relating to in terms of what the rules were. And they were allowed to go out till about midnight, and I had to come back by 10. So it's like similar to that kind of thing in a sense.
Yes, perfect.
But it's very interesting how they can still recognize that you have to ask this person for full permission. You can't be going behind the back and go to the other person and ask, because it has to be the parent. So it's nice that they still recognize that kind of difference themselves.
Yes, and that was something we dealt with in an ongoing way. And there were a couple tries. I remember my stepson coming to me asking me something, and I made a decision, and then he didn't like that and went to his dad and asked the same question. And he said, did she already tell you no? why are you asking me? So there were some things, and that's something that my husband and I were able to discuss with each other and to the kids, is that um, I may not be their mom, but I was the mom of this house.
Hmm.
Um, and my husband was not my daughter's father, but he was the father of this house. So in times where we did team up as a parenting team, we could explain it that way to them, without trying to say I'm going to act like your mom. But no, I'm just the mom. I'm just the mom here. And so when I say, you know, let's let's bring your dishes to the sink and go ahead and put them in the dishwasher. Well, my mom wants to make me do that. That's okay. That's her house, but this is my house. So that's what we're going to do at this house. And never really got a lot of pushback. I think that was something they could understand, and I'm thankful.
Yeah, that sounds, even I think even biological family, they still have that trouble of the kids sort of going between the two
Oh,
parents.
definitely,
I know I
definitely,
definitely did when I was younger. Like I was a bit of an adventurous child who knew she could get on dad's good side for for a little bit. So
for sure, for
there's
sure.
definitely that. So as we see, children are the most critical part of a step family, and every child sort of reacts to things differently. When, in terms of the ages of the child, are parental relationships most influential to step parenting?
I think I think the younger, the better. Just by way of um, what you're used to and what you are used to, and how who all you grew up with. My daughter does not ever remember not having my husband and my stepkids in her life. That's how she grew up. She grew up in and but with her father and her stepmother, she has a half sister, and so she does remember time with her dad before he was remarried, and then a time before her half sister was born. So I remember. I have a dear friend who is also a therapist, and she told me um, after we were married, she said, Lindsey, honestly, I think it was too soon for you and Brad. I think you two got married too quickly, but it was the perfect time for the kids. It was the perfect time for the kids. So they were 10, 8, and not quite 4.
Mhm.
And so they were still very open. We hadn't had the middle school, the hormones, the pushback, the attitude yet, and so I'm very thankful for that timing. And yes, my husband and I had to work a little harder to figure stuff out, but I think it was better for the kids. And I have a dear friend who got married for the second time just this past November,
Mhm.
and they have 6 kids together.
Wow.
And I think the youngest one is 13. And I just know, they've all had life, they've all lived life without each other for quite some time. And I'm expecting that to be very challenging for her. And we've had long conversations, and obviously I told her, I said, I got your back. I'm right here, and there's no reason to have any fears or doubts or anything alone. You're in good company. And I remember telling my husband, we were sitting there at the wedding, I was like, man, I wish I had had another stepmom friend
Mhm.
in those first few years that I could have bounced stuff off of, because I know I made tons of mistakes, and you're doing your best. But yeah, like you said, it's not something when you get when you become a stepmom, when you become a mom, when you're becoming a mom, you have baby showers and there's celebrations, and It's wonderful, but nobody throws you a stepmom shower. It's something that's, like I said, comes out of a great amount of sadness and brokenness. So it's, I want to make it something that's so much more normal. It is so common with the divorce rate the way it is. It's so common. There's no reason it has to be weird anymore. It needs to be common, and we need to have conversations and be able to call each other in the middle of the night in tears and frustration and saying, I'm messing this all up, or my stepkids hate me and I love them and I'm trying. So I want that to, hopefully someday, I just want it to be as normal as talking about just basic motherhood.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how it gets a bad rep, like especially when it comes to TV and film and
For
just
sure.
seeing how it comes up. I mean, you grew up in Disney and you see stepmother in
I was
Cinderella
going
and
to
you're like,
say, they didn't do us any favors, for
no,
heaven's sake.
exactly. Like there was no place where it was a really good thing. I think until I just saw the recent Enchanted movie that came out.
Oh, I haven't
Enchanted
seen it.
2.
The
It's
Disenchanted?
Yeah, it's really
Oh,
good when
yeah,
it talks about it.
I loved the first one. I've got to watch it.
Yes, it was incredible. Like the way that they dived into the relationship between the stepdaughter and the stepmother. It's an amazing way of how the modern world deals with step parenting. And that's when I
Oh,
when I heard
I
this
can't believe
topic.
I haven't watched it. I wish we could talk about it.
I know,
Gosh.
I know. I'm so When you see it, just you can email me and just let me know how it
We
goes.
will. Gosh. Okay. I had
Okay.
no idea I was going to get into that. How perfect.
So for the audience, if you haven't seen it, go watch it, especially when it comes to this topic. I think it was so important. Um, so I think this leads perfectly into the next question. What are some myths or some misconceptions about parental relationships in a step family that are very common to hear?
Um, well, definitely that all step people are evil, for sure.
Yeah.
Like you said, the very first time I ever heard of a stepmother, of course, was Disney. And so it was synonymous with bad guy. Like it just, and so anytime as I got older and heard of, my friends having stepmothers, I was like, oh my gosh, are they so scary? Are you so sad all the time? Are they so mean? And they're like, no, no. But I didn't have a lot of friends who came from divorced families, and like I said, it's pretty common anymore. But no, they're not all evil. And also, I think a myth is that the two families will always be at odds. That does not have to be the case, and the only way it can work in a good way is that if all four people want it to be a certain way. And I'm thankful to say that my first husband and I have a good working relationship, and that my current husband and my first husband are now friends, and that my daughter's stepmother and I have a great relationship. And she turned six. Our daughter turned 16 just this past month, and her dad and stepmom came down, and their daughter, and I was we were all there together, and my stepchildren, my current husband's children, we were all there, and we all ate pizza and celebrated her birthday together. And I remember just taking a moment and kind of stepping back and looking, going, we're family. We're a big, messy, broken, pieced together family. And only because everyone wanted it that way. If you have even one person in a parental role who isn't comfortable with it, it won't work. And that's not wrong. That's not wrong. Sometimes it's not healthy. to maintain or try to pursue a friendship with a former partner. Sometimes it is not a good idea. So all the stars have to really be aligned for that to happen. But I think it's becoming more and more common that you don't have to stay enemies with your ex. Sometimes, like I said, there are abusive situations or just really toxic situations, or that people just big fat don't want it. And that's their choice for sure. But when it can work out, it's, I remember texting my first husband and his wife the next day saying, that was magical. I am so thankful for you guys and that we can do this. And I think that's a myth that you have to stay mad, that you have to stay enemies, or that the new wife and the first wife have to hate each other, or the new husband and the first husband feel competition in an ongoing way. I think that's a myth. It doesn't have to be that way. And like I said, sometimes it is, sometimes it's even better to keep a distance, but it also doesn't have to be that way.
I think it's really interesting just how much, like, as you say, some abusive cases that you shouldn't have communication with them anymore. But when you have that sort of balance between, okay, this is what's best for the kids, you need both parents still want to be a part of the children's life, then this is what you have to do. I think it's nice to sort of find a way to do it, especially with kids involved. And not a lot of families know that that can happen. You can still be in a healthy relationship, but just be in communication.
Yes, and it took it took years.
Mm-hmm.
We were not this way right away, and I think that was important that we all had some time to heal. But like I said, thankfully, my daughter was very young,
Mm-hmm.
and just always remembered her dad and I getting along well. And like I said, mainly just a really good business relationship, a working relationship. But I can say I've heard her father and her stepfather call each other friends and
Mm-hmm.
text each other during football games because they cheer for the same team. Or have you tried this bourbon? I tried it the other night and you would love it. And I'm like, that is so weird. What's going on? But I remember when we were all at my daughter's softball game when she was younger, and her dad, my husband, invited her dad back to the house to watch the beginning of a football game. And I remember her kind of pulling on my shirt, and I leaned down and she said, "Mommy, I'm so glad my two dads like each other." And I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, me too. Me too." And it's not possible and it's not advisable in every situation, even for the kids. I think there's some kids who would be really uncomfortable with their divorced parents in the same place, and that is completely valid. But when it can work, um, it's magical and it's redemption, and it's an incredible it's incredibly healing and positive experience.
No, I definitely agree, especially when you make the best out of the situation as well. I
Yeah.
think making the best out of it is really nice that you found an outcome that suits everyone, that makes everyone feel healthy in the ways that they can grow.
Yes.
So, going into a little bit more about the practices and habits, um, what's a practice that you do or you recommend to improve your parental relationships in a step family situation?
I think a really good mindset, and this is where I made some missteps, um, is that giving the child room to um, come closer and pull back and connect and disconnect, a little bit of a dance while they're figuring it out. And even now that my stepchildren are grown and out of the house, we hit a certain level of comfort. And I just assumed, the plane has landed. There we are, and so it'll be great forever. And there's still a push and pull. And I had a conversation with my stepson recently, and I said, I will be as much as you need or as little as you need for the rest of your life. And I am right here if you need more of me, or if you need less of me, I will be right here. And that's, it's not easy. It's not easy. It can be very painful during those moments when there's pulling away and kind of resettling. And a lot of that, you could say in biological families as well, as the kids are getting older and they need you less. But specifically in a step parenting family, and it might have something to do with their biological parent and how that relationship is at any given moment can unfortunately affect yours. And I would love it if, those things could be kept separate, but life is messy. It's not cut and dry. And like I said, I was talking about myths and the step parents and all of that stuff. I was like, great. I have two wonderful, strong, close relationships with my stepkids, and now we are sitting in the happily ever after. Well, things can still change, and they always, always will. And so I think a really good practice that I wish I had been more prepared for their benefit as well, is to just realize that relationship will always be in flux, and that's okay. That's okay. I don't need to panic or feel a sense of loss necessarily, because the story's not over, but that there will always be a dance, a step forward and a step back and a step to the side. And I think step parent is perfect. I think because there's always some step that's about to happen. So not really settling in or getting too attached to what things are. And I think with your biological child, there is a greater sense of security because of that blood connection. Like, they might pull away from you, but you don't worry about losing them in the same way, just because there is that sense of security that comes with being biologically related. But the come and go of a step kid relationship can be scary and can be sad and can be hard, because you don't have that guarantee. It's all of a sudden they might be willing to put you on a shelf when you had been really close for a time, but then there's always the chance that they will take you back off that shelf and desperately need you again someday. And I think the best thing I can do is to just say, I'm here for as much or as little as you need. And that could be really hard for me, but guess what? I'm the parent. I'm the parent. I'm the step parent. I'm the parent in this house. And so I think it's on the adult to be the adult and not put pressure on the kid to meet your emotional needs, biological or your step kid. To, it's on you to be the steady, sure person in that relationship, and to let them figure it out.
I think it's important, especially as you mentioned, as the kids get older and things like that, they sort of go through, I mean, even biologically, you're sort of still in that relationship where you're just not really as close as you would be, because you live under the same house growing up, and then suddenly they're moving on, and they're trying to build their own life and trying to go through a lot of stuff of their own as they sub differently to what you did, to what they did when they were under your roof. So it's a nice, I love the way that you word things as well, just how I'll be there for as little or as much as you need, and having that assurance. I mean, even hearing that as a kid, as a child, to parents, from my parents, is something that's really important to know, that they're always there, and they're that one thing that you can really count on.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's why I think, like we talked about in the beginning, that some kind of family, some version of family is always going to be incredibly important to our society, just
Mhm.
because there's a home base somewhere with
Yeah.
someone, and that's what we would call family. And regardless of what that looks like at any given moment, that it's there in some form or fashion.
Mhm. So are there some traditions in your family that sort of like bring everyone together? Like, I think you said off camera, you're talking about Christmas, everyone was together. Is that something that you try to do every year?
We actually, at the beginning of our blended family, when my husband and I got married and we combined our families, we were lucky enough to be able to coordinate with our former partners the holidays.
Mhm.
And so Thanksgiving and Christmas, we alternate. My daughter's father and I alternate. If one of us has Thanksgiving, the other has Christmas every year. And we coordinated with the other family so that my husband and the mother of his kids do it the same year, Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Mhm.
So there are holidays where it's just my husband and me, because all of our kids are with their other parents.
Mhm.
But it is such a joy when we're all together for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and we go see relatives in Georgia,
Mhm.
north of here, and his mother and his siblings, and so they're cousins. And um, yeah, that's been a tradition that we've been able to kind of finagle with all of the scheduling and logistics. We've been able to get all of the kids together for holidays, and we had that this year. Everybody was home together. The two older ones home from college, and um, my daughter was here because she was with her father for Thanksgiving, and they were with their mother for Thanksgiving. And so, yeah, that's been a tradition. And oh man, my husband and I just like white knuckle that. Like whenever anybody starts talking about messing with the schedule, we're like, no, no, nope. We are just holding on to those holidays that are, ours, that we say,
Yeah.
just to have something we can count on. And I'm sure as they continue to grow and have families of their own, that won't always be the case. But for as long as we can, we're going to take everybody together when we can get them.
Um, so how do you think that this practice or this tradition has impacted your family and also your perception of life?
It's just so important for all of us, I think, to have something we can count on.
Mhm.
And marriages fail, and things, unexpectedly happen. Life is always going to throw you curveballs. And another thing we say around here a lot, or at least when the kids were growing up, is they're saying, well, it should be like this. Well, it should be like, guys, we left should a long time ago. Like I said, we don't hang our hats on should anymore, because, what should have happened did not, in fact, happen. And
Mhm.
that's why we're here. And that's why we're a family. So I think, with mental health being such an issue more than it's ever been now, it's important to have things you can absolutely count on without fail. And people are not perfect, and people will fail you, but knowing that you're always going to have relationships with people who are trying to stay connected, trying to stay in your life, trying to do right by you, knowing that those people are there, in some definition of a family. I think that's just so important for all of us, like in our souls, to be able to sleep at night, that there is some certainty, even, when everything falls apart, that in those pieces, there are going to be things in there that you can still count on.
Mm-hmm. So based on your experience dealing with this tradition and finding time each year to see each other, what other recommendations of a practice or a tradition do you combine to sort of make sure that there's is another thing so that you're not just seeing each other once a year? Is there any other time that you plan on seeing everyone or seeing other people, other family members?
Um, well, I would say when the kids were younger, spring break, we would try to, gosh, man, when the kids started going off to college, it was just, that's a whole different story of parenting. And it was so different. And, my poor daughter, who's used to having, two siblings in the house with her, at least half the time is now, an only child. And I think I remember I grew up in a family of three, and my older sister and I were close in age, and then our younger sister was a little um, uh, younger than us in age. And so when we were in college, she was um, she was the center of attention, but that wasn't a good thing. All of a sudden, you're in that age as a teenager where you don't want to be center of attention. You want space, and you want to be able to go in your room and close the door without your parents, whose attention was previously diluted among three kids, is all of a sudden laser focused on you. And so that's not always a good thing. But in the summertime, we have, for as long as we've been together, and even before my daughter and I joined the family, my husband's family goes to the beach every year with all of the aunts and uncles and cousins. And so we've been able to be a part of that as well. And again, these kids are growing up and they're getting jobs and getting married and having their own kids. This new next generation is starting to come along. So it can't always work, but for anyone that can get there, when we choose that week in the summer, we all look forward to it as a time to catch up and be together and stay connected.
I love that. I love when, even though you're so far away, you still have that connection and you still find the time. Even if not everyone is there, it's still like the just knowing that you can turn up and you can be there and you can join in, I think is really nice. It's a really nice feeling to know that family is always there. So
Yes,
I love that.
yes.
So we're going to go into some of the questions from audience members that were sent in to us. So the first one is asking, how can boundaries be ensured so that step parents don't overstep and take on the role completely of biological parents?
Very tricky, very tricky. And boundaries is the perfect word. And in step families and step family relationships, I think it's really important that there be just a complete environment of grace and ongoing forgiveness, because you will overstep, you will get it wrong. And I think, and one of the things I tell friends and families and anyone who will listen who are in a blended family situation is never, ever tell your stepkids what to do. That's not your job. It's not your job. And the thing is, I think everybody can relate to being outside of a family and looking at a family going, oh, my kids would never act like that. Or here's the problem with what they're doing. Here's where they're failing as parents, and here's how I would do it differently. And you walk into that as a step parent. You walk into it and you can immediately see the holes. And my husband can see all of the weaknesses in my relationship with my daughter. And he's not wrong. He's not wrong. And yet, without that biological connection, you really don't have the right to step in. Now, we make suggestions to each other behind closed doors constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And we have that option on, and I'm thankful for his insight, not in the moment ever. You don't want anyone to ever tell you
Mm-hmm.
about something you're doing wrong with your child, or that your child is doing something wrong. But getting to a place where you can, without feeling defensive, hear someone else's perspective on your child, but knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt that they will never tell your child what to do, that that's your job. And again, that it's really more of an aunt or an uncle role. So I think that is a huge boundary that as adults, to be able to remind each other gently, or like I said, there just has to be a starting point of so much grace, because it is such a mess. And if you have a mindset, I am not ever going to tell my stepkids what to do. I'm just not going to tell them what to do. I might ask them if they would do something for me. And it's not okay for your stepkids to disrespect you. And that's when you need to be able to count on your spouse to step in and say, hold on, that's not how we're going to talk to each other. At the same time, you can help with that by not trying to step into a place of authority. And it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like, oh my gosh, you are the mom of the house. You can tell everybody what to do. No, it's bad for your relationship with your stepkids. It's actually bad for your marriage too. And so having boundaries in place can be so helpful, but also knowing that those boundaries are covered on every side with grace, and that forgiveness on a hair trigger, because we're flawed and we're going to get it wrong as hard as we try to get it right. So just being willing to, going to your stepkids and saying, I totally blew it right there. I totally blew it. I am so sorry. Will you forgive me? And being vulnerable to, and also, of course, your biological children. You're going to mess up with them, and being able to apologize, but especially to your stepkids when you've overstepped. Just doing whatever it takes to, even if you, for them to know, I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to get it wrong, but I love you so much, and I am going to kill myself to show you how much I love you. And when I blow it, I am going to apologize, because my relationship with you is a top priority. But having those boundaries in place absolutely can protect against a lot of overstepping, but also fully expecting that is going to happen, and being willing to back away quickly and apologize when it does.
Okay, perfect. The second one is, how can parents teach children to accommodate and accept step families, especially younger children?
I think kids, honestly, the best thing that happened in our family when we first got married is my stepson, who was 10 at the time. My husband and I look back, we talk about it all the time. I've told him, now that he's an adult and 22, I've told him, I'm like, it was you. It was you. He was, and I don't think either of us could have taught him this. He decided from the very beginning, I am on board with this. This is my family. And that his two younger sisters, his sister and his stepsister, were watching. And he was completely on board, completely fine with accepting this new reality. And I was waiting, based on everything I had read, for a lot more conflict from my stepkids, the pushback that you're not my mom. But somehow the two younger ones watching the older one, and then my husband and I watching this child just kind of lead us into this blended family. He gave all of us permission, and he had no idea. He had no idea the impact that he was making, and I don't think we did at the time either. But um, and a second marriage in and of itself is very, very difficult because you have two people who have been very hurt previously. So there's a lot, the trust comes a lot slower. But being able to lead your children by way of, this is a good idea, this family, and, you know, wrestling it out behind closed doors. And I'm not saying that kids shouldn't see you have conflict and see you work through that in a healthy way, but until you can do it in a healthy way, for them to see you, you know, put on a brave face sometimes and just constantly putting out there, especially with younger kids, this is a great idea. This family is a great idea, and I love this family. As a young child, they don't need to watch the adults panic in a new situation, even if that is and that is a very legitimate feeling in second marriages, to be sure. But as far as what you're putting out to the kids when they're young is just, we love each other. All of us love each other, and we are going to be some kind of weird piece together family, and just putting out there a sense of confidence that you might not even have. I think it's completely okay to bluff with younger kids, the fake it till you make it kind of thing, as long as you are working very hard behind closed doors to make that a reality. And I think counseling is incredibly important in a new marriage and a second marriage, because the family can only be as strong as the marriage, really. Everybody is so worried about the kids. And I remember my husband and I getting counseling from that good friend I mentioned earlier. And she finally, one session, she said, "Oh my gosh, you guys, stop worrying about the kids. The kids are fine. You two are a mess. The kids are fine. Stop talking about the kids. Let's work on y'all." And I laughed because she was right. The kids were fine. They were. We were a mess, and we were still figuring it out. But for them to just be able to look to us as a team and see a sense of stability that we were still working on, but them knowing that we were committed to working on it, I think that was really, that's something that you can do for your kids, putting out there this commitment to the family. The reality is that second marriages fail. I believe the divorce rate is just under 50% for first marriages. For second marriages, it's around 70% wow. failure rate. Those are not good odds. They're not good odds. And once you've ripped off the Band-Aid of divorce once, I think you could rip it off much easier the second time, because your threshold for what you're willing to put up with is much lower. The first time I read that, I went, gosh, I would think you would be willing to work that much harder. At a second marriage, you know, you would learn from your mistakes, so the divorce rate would be much lower, but it's actually much higher. So knowing that you're walking into it and it's not going to be your happily ever after, it never was going to be, not in a first marriage, not in a second marriage. It's a commitment, and it's a decision to love and to forgive and to work at it, because on the other side of it is these deep connections that are formed in difficult times sometimes.
It's a really interesting area to even dive in. I think the last question is going to be, it sounds pretty sad, but it's very few lines. It's just basically, how do I get my teenage stepchild to want to have a connection with me?
When I first got married, actually when my husband and I were still dating, he had this amazing question that I that just blew my mind. And it was the perfect question. I've completely um, made it part of my everyday vocabulary. Is what do you need from me? What do you need from me? When he and I would start to bump heads, or when I would be sad, even just having a bad day at work, the first thing he says is, what do you need from me? Because it can be different. It can be, I need you to be all up in my face. I need you to turn on Almost Famous. I need you to go get me some takeout. I need
Mm-hmm.
you, or I could just need a minute. I could need some space, but I know you're out there if I need you. Just being willing to, what do you need from me? And like I said, with my stepson, being willing to be there as much or as little as they want, because sometimes they are going to desperately want you and sometimes they're not. And there might be years, very painful years, where they do not want you.
Mm-hmm.
But them feeling pressure or guilt or responsible for your sadness at the lack of relationship is going to do more harm than good. If you sit down and be like, oh my gosh, I so want to connect with you. Why don't you want to connect with me? Don't you love me? Don't you want me to love you? No, 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 no. Just occasionally, what do you need from me? When they get home from school, what do you need from me? Just being there as just a steady presence. Even they might be taking so much comfort just from your presence in the house. They may not be spilling their guts to you. They may not be wanting to spend a lot of time with you, but just having you there might be ministering to them in ways you just can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So just being willing to be as much or as little as they need, and them just having those gentle reminders from you every day. What do you need from me? Nothing. Okay, I'm here if you need me. And moving on quickly. Asking them a brief question about their day. How did your test go? I don't want to talk about it. Okay. And being willing to not take it personally because it has nothing to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
Chances are it has very little to do with you. And we give our children so much power to absolutely destroy us. And as a biological parent, you can't help it. But at the same time, you have to remind yourself, they're kids. They don't know what to do with our hearts. They don't know what to do with us. That's a lot. We need to lead in the relationship. And even if that's just standing there and being a comforting presence, that relationship could very easily bloom into something later in life. Or telling yourself, honestly, I love this kid, whether he ever wants me or not, and I will be okay with that. My job in this family is to love him unconditionally and expecting nothing in return.
Mm-hmm.
So, really lowering your expectation of that kid to meet that need that you have. Learning to be telling yourself, I'm going to be okay with as much or as little as he or she wants from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be there for whatever they need, and just letting them off the hook, completely letting them off the hook um, of any kind of obligation to connect with you will free them up to pursue that connection someday if they want to. And
Mm-hmm.
again, just being that presence as an aunt or an uncle, something steady, something sure, but not forceful, not aggressive, not overbearing, but just something there they can count on, I think is the best thing you can do, because you cannot make somebody want you. You cannot force a relationship,
Mm-hmm.
but you can create that foundation, that kind of fertile land where something can grow. And I think um, the more space and the more freedom you can offer them to come and go, the better.
I think that's a great answer. It's a great response to it. So we love to give our guests this little time. It's called open mic, and just for you to be able to talk about anything that you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be related to the topic at all. It could be something that you are working on or that you want to share with the audience. So I'd love to give you the floor and you can just talk about anything that you feel like sharing.
I think something that's really important to me, and something that a lesson that I keep learning over and over and over in step parenting, in teaching, in other jobs I've had in different phases of life, is people talk about their purpose a lot, and they want to know what their purpose is and why am I here and what is my purpose. And something I learned a while ago, and that I continue to learn, is that I think you can find your purpose in your greatest source of pain. And what I mean is, if you want to know your purpose, you can look back at the probably the worst thing that has ever happened to you, and you being willing to share with someone else going through that, you being on the other side of it, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a death in the family, whether it's a cancer diagnosis, if you can find your greatest source of pain, you have found almost your superpower that you can offer someone else. Being willing to share pain that you've been in with someone who's going through it currently can save them, can save their life, can save their sanity. There is nothing more powerful in the world than saying, oh my gosh, I know exactly how you feel. And being able to talk to someone on the other side of what you're in the thick of. So when people talk about their purpose, and I had a conversation with a friend one time, I remember telling her, I had someone reach out to me who struggled with addiction. I have never been through that, but I had a friend who has. And so I reached out to her on behalf of this person. I'm like, I need you to talk to so-and-so. Mm-hmm. This person's struggling with addiction. I don't have anything for her, but you do. And so the friend I was talking to, who did, kind of get through to the other side of addiction, she said, no, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want that to be my identity. I don't want that to be my story. I don't want that to be my purpose. I said, well, you don't really get to pick, you don't really get the choice. It's kind of, I didn't pick my purpose to be talking to people about their divorce and blended family. I didn't want that. She goes, I don't want addiction to be my superpower. I said, I don't want divorce to be my superpower either. However, knowing that there's so many people out there who can benefit from things I've learned, mistakes I've made, things I've survived, even being able to point them to a book or a TED Talk or a podcast that really helped me, being willing to step into the worst thing that ever happened to you and use that as a platform to help other people. Because really it is, at that point, you've survived it. You want to walk away from it, act like it never happened. But if you're willing to go back and stand in it and share from it with other people, you will have a giant impact on this world. We need more people who are willing to share what they've survived with people who are in the same thing. Because if you don't know, you don't know. And I remember going through my divorce and my mom saying, I can't help you. I'm your mother. I should be able to fix this. I should be able to. She said, I can't help you. She is still married to my father, and wonderful. I'm so thankful. I don't wish it upon anyone. But at the same time, I know I can help people who have been through this. And I think, and kind of, just even being on this podcast, being willing to talk about it, if you are willing to find the worst thing that ever happened to you and not necessarily owning that and making your identity, but the redemptive part of it, the lessons learned from it, and being willing to share it with someone who's in the thick of it, oh my gosh, it is powerful. And I think it's something that, like I said, when you've been through something awful, you want to walk away and you want to forget about it, but you have a life preserver that you can hand to someone else who's still in it.
Mhm.
And I think it's a mistake to try to act like bad things never happened. I think it's one of the best things you can do in this world to change the world, to make it a better place, is to speak from a pain point that unfortunately you're an expert in now. I didn't want to be an expert in this. And I don't know if I would call myself an expert, but I know more than people who are, you know, who are not married, people who have not been in a step family situation before. And I am so thrilled and more than willing to be able to offer that with people. And if I had known someone who had been a few steps ahead of me in the process, I think I could have greatly benefited from that.
Mhm.
So I think us being willing to go and speak from a painful experience can be a lifesaver for someone in ways that we can't even imagine.
No, I love it's like sort of like a job position, for example. Like you start off as the entry level and you have no idea where you're going, but you get that mentor that comes in and sort of
Mm-hmm.
teaches you how to guides you through how to survive the job or how to get through the job. And that's sort of how life is. Life is kind of like a job. I sort of see it as like you're always still trying to learn something and you're not skilled, you're not qualified for the position at all. But the more you go through it, the more years that you have on it, the more you experience it. And the more you can help someone else as well. Someday you'll be in that position when you're able to help. And
Exactly.
yeah, so I
I've
think it's
told
great.
friends that who have reached out to me and I've helped, and they're like, "Thank you so much, thank you so much." And I'm like, "You're going to do this for someone. You are going to do this for someone else someday.
Mhm.
In fact, if you don't, I'm going to be really mad. Like, don't don't waste this. Like, don't stand in awe of anything. Just realize this is going to be you someday, and you're going to call me and be like, guess what? I didn't think I was going to survive that, but I got to turn around and help somebody else with it today. And that's going to be an incredible day." My friend who I mentioned, who was dealing with addiction, she went through the 12-step program. And while I was begging her to talk to this other person about what she had been through, she finally relented and she said, that's the 12th step. And I said, what do you mean? She said, the 12th step in the 12-step program of AA or NA or anything like that is reaching back and helping someone who's a little earlier in the process. So it's almost quite literally going full circle. Like,
Mhm.
your healing is almost completed when you're able to take that experience and help someone else with it. It's good for you,
Mm.
and it makes what you went through mean something instead of just being some useless, random pain. It had a purpose, and now you have a purpose. And there's something incredibly redemptive about that.
No, I love that, especially how impactful. I mean, like even looking at the 12-step process, and I've had a look at it before, and it's really amazing how much it actually does adapt you to life, even without addiction on
It
anything.
applies to everything. I'm
Exactly.
convinced we all need to be working the 12 steps for something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing how important it actually is. And you put it into a system of it being AA or for addiction, and but if you just apply it to life, I think it's even more incredible as well.
I agree 100%.
So I want to thank you so much for joining me today and for talking about step families and the importance of it and the differences that comes into life. If there's a way that the audience would like to contact you, is there a way that they are able to?
Absolutely. I have a website. It's slightly outdated right now, but it is still there.
Mhm.
It's lindseystaton.com. And there's a contact page that's just an email address, and they can reach out to me. I love setting up phone calls or Skype calls with anyone, or sometimes we set up a coaching package, and we have a longer term relationship and we pursue different goals. And sometimes it's within a step family situation, and sometimes it's more broad in other life coaching areas. But this is definitely a heartbeat for me. And just because, like I said, there's so much hurt out there, and there's so many people feeling alone in it. And that's just not necessary at all.
Well, that's amazing. So thank you so much for joining me, Lindsey. And
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
It's amazing that you're able to join me on a Sunday afternoon, so evening. So I really appreciate that.
Of course, of course.
So if you guys want any more episodes, definitely head to our website, and all the links will be down below. You've got the whole list of episodes on both Spotify and YouTube. So if you want to listen to it on the go, and Spotify and Apple are there for you. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. You've been listening to Altogether, the Family Science Insights podcast, produced by Family Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at fa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant, and thanks for tuning in.